This is Asher Westropp-Evans here with REIMAGINE 2020, another exciting conference event that we're taking on today. And here with us is none other than the Wolf of all streets himself, Scott Melker. Scott, a storied past. You came in, left the exciting world of the DJing circuit as a musician of over 20 years, joined the crypto space, and are now here not only as a denizen, but as you say, a wolf of all streets, a master of it all. Also write the Wolf Den newsletter and so much more, an educator, a builder, a learner, and influencer in the space. Scott, firstly, I want to say thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Very flattering. It's still funny. I pinch myself a little bit that I can get an introduction like that, because it's certainly never my intention. It just sort of happened, but it's very flattering and I appreciate it.
Hey man, those best things happen organically. So speaking of organically, your move into the space, I want to touch on that history, but I want to as well just take a bit of a pause and a thought of, where we are in 2020 since you came into the space. Let's look at the now. Since you came into the space, looking at the latter half of 2020 as we see it now, what are the major changes? What are the biggest sort of shifts in tone, in attitude, in projects, in people that you think have occurred in the crypto space since you got in?
Well, Sir John Templeton famously said there's no four more dangerous words in investing than "this time it's different," right? It's a very famous quote, one that I bring up often because this time I dare say it's different. And I know that that's a dangerous sentiment, but as you touched on, I think that there's a lot to talk about here and a lot to parse as to the reason that 2020 looks very different from 2016 and 17 when I entered the space, which by any metric is pretty late, right? I mean, I wasn't a 2010 OG or any of those. I definitely came for the dollars, not for the Bitcoin. I was a trader, right. And I saw this sort of mythical land of 100x pumps that people were talking about. Had no idea really what I was trading or what I was doing. I just knew that the numbers kept going up, right? And so the reason I touch on that is because I think that was the main motivation for most people in 2017, right? It started with people who understood how to trade. It started with some investors, and then it carried through to this sort of insane retail FOMO that we saw. Speculative FOMO, right? Your hairdresser, your Uber driver, right. Every single one of them was telling you by the end of 2017 to buy Bitcoin. But if you asked them what it was, they had no idea. They said, it's this thing that just keeps going up and the price never goes down. I'm buying it so that I can sell it for more, right? They never intended to hold it. They never intended to invest in it. They just had to have a part of it because everyone was talking about it, right? Completely different this time. It really is, right? First of all, you don't have that retail FOMO yet. By any metric, I don't think that there's been as much interest until very, very recently. Now I'm starting to get the calls again from the random people asking if they should buy Bitcoin, which is like so insane. You didn't want it when I was screaming at 4,000 and 6,000 that you had to buy this. Right. Now you want it, near all-time highs, or depending on when this prints above or well below. I have no idea.
Exactly.
But so the difference here that I've kind of, in trying to think through it myself, before we had the speculative FOMO I talked about, but this time I think we have almost hold FOMO, right? So before people wanted to buy it so they could sell it for more. Now people want to buy it because they believe in the actual use case. They believe it's a hedge. They see what the central banks are doing. They understand inflation. They see billionaires coming out day by day saying that they've invested in this. They see MicroStrategy. They see PayPal. They see Square putting their money of their treasury into Bitcoin. And so now they want to have it as a hedge, as an investment. So what happens there, right? Well, we had the halvening, obviously. You have supply side shock, basically. You have all these people that want to hold it, but no longer are interested in selling it. They just want to hold it for the long term. Right. You have huge players coming in, making massive bets, hundreds of millions of dollars, and you have supply decreasing. I mean, anyone who's even has a basic knowledge of economics, trading, investing knows that, increase in demand and reduction of supply means the number goes up. So I think that we're sort of living through the Bitcoin maximalist wet dream right now. Except, it kind of knew it would always happen, but COVID obviously accelerated it. And then COVID opened the doors to people to really look at central bank policy and understand how insane the system was, something that most of us kind of knew before. And so, the stars are aligning. It's sort of this serendipitous moment in time where all of a sudden we get to laugh at the people who laughed at us, and I think that it's here to stay.
All right, so I want to touch on a big part of what you just said there, talking about like, all right, so here we are, we had the speculative wave in sort of 2016, 17. Now we are here with like the hedging wave, whether that be yet driven by institutions or yet still driven by individuals who are now a little bit more savvy, a little bit more aware, a little bit more thinking about, central bank monetary policy and those sort of elements. And, obviously one of the key catalysts in the last few months was the MicroStrategy impact. That really, at least within the community, had a huge catalyzing effect. But I know this is something that you've spoken about, on Wolf of Wall Streets, and you've had this conversation. And I want to understand what you think the really true impact of that was. I mean, was that really the catalyst that's going to go down in the history books as the institutional driver in this particular bull run and wave? Or was that really just another stepping stone? And if so, what are the other steps that have led us to where we are right now?
I think it's a stepping stone. I had Michael Saylor on my podcast, and it was like probably by 10 times the most popular podcast that I've ever done. If that shows sort of what a legend, as he even referred to himself as a Giga Chad in the interview, which was funny because that's what everybody calls him. I've never met a better evangelist for Bitcoin who can make a clearer case. And I think that coupled with the fact that he made this huge bet with his company, which means that he had to pass it by the shareholders, the lawyers, the board. This isn't just like a guy had a whim, right? It's a publicly traded company. Everybody had to come on board. So it's a huge thing because he did that. But we're seeing sort of slowly that a lot of people as wealthy as him are already exposed and are finally just having sort of the guts to admit it. The Druckenmillers and the Bill Millers, CEO of Skype, CEO of Intercom, all these companies, all these people are exposed. They've all had Bitcoin, right? They've all been buying it. So I think that, MicroStrategy's buy is somewhat a symptom of the problem that we all saw, right? Or a solution in their eyes. And everybody saw it. So MicroStrategy may have been the first one to do it so publicly, but there's nothing they did that's groundbreaking as far as what people have always, who understood, believed in Bitcoin and about central bank policy and fiscal policy. So I would say that, COVID, as I said, first of all, I think most people saw a market correction coming. Markets don't go straight up. There's always a retrace, a correction, whether you consider it a recession, a bear market, whatever it is, just nothing goes straight up. So everybody who ever has looked at a chart or looked at the fundamentals knew that the stock market couldn't continue doing this forever, right? So the catalyst was COVID for something. It happened harder and faster, but I think it was going to happen anyways. But I think that COVID really, and the market dip, and then stimulus, and seeing once again, most importantly, this crony capitalism in the United States, this corporate socialism, the bailouts of companies. I mean, the government buying Apple bonds when Apple has hundreds of billions of dollars in cash reserves, just this insanity of the people suffering and the companies and the rich being bailed out again. I think it just made all of the beliefs in Bitcoin come to the forefront and become very obvious and very, very true. So as a long-winded way to say that MicroStrategy was one stepping stone, but they were reacting, to something that I think a lot of people saw coming long before. They certainly gave a lot of confidence to other companies and billionaires to be public about their beliefs.
All right, so companies and billionaires, and I guess that's obviously a powerful development. And when you have the likes of Saylow and Druckenmiller and Miller and whomever else coming on board and sort of saying this is valid, this is real, this is something that's obviously great for the industry itself. But calling back to how you go by, you call yourself the Wolf of All Streets for a very specific purpose. That it's about the everyman. It's about considering people at all walks of life. And I suppose I wonder, people have been through the GFC now. They've been through at least the first machinations of the COVID crisis. Although who knows where that's going to take us from here. But do you think that there's, the average man on the street, the sort of local, whether it be the cab driver or even, even the day trader, even the maybe slightly more financially savvy, but do you think that the average person is really turning to Bitcoin now because they understand the failings of the system, or is it just, hey, here's a good place to make a buck?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's still some of the latter, but like I said, it's a fraction of what we were seeing in 2017, and that was the only reason people were buying in 2017, right? We didn't even see a fraction of the other side, which was the actual use case and the reason, and the what we always have believed in. As I said, I think that your average person now, for the first time, is thinking about what money is, what it means, how it comes into creation. They're realizing that it's kind of a scam, and I hate to use that word, but that, the system is very much rigged against them. And it's impossible not to see it. Like I said, as you see where the money is going, that they can print it endlessly, but how is that helping me on the street? Right. So I think that there's this sort of grand awakening that's showing the cracks in legacy systems. And there's a fraction of the people who see that then find Bitcoin and dig deeper and buy it. But I don't think that retail is buying Bitcoin in mass right now. Right. I don't think that's maybe right now, but I don't think that that's what's driven price from, it was only under 4,000 for about 5 minutes, but let's call it 6,000 is the real floor of the financial crisis, even though price went lower temporarily. I think that it's been largely big money and believers that have driven the price up and have been buying it since then. Obviously, a fundamental event like a halving of supply, that, up over a couple 100% from there, right? Or at least 100%. I can't remember the exact price at the halving at this moment. But, there were real fundamental reasons for this to happen. But if you're asking about the average Joe, I still think they probably don't get Bitcoin on the level that maybe us who are so immersed in the community believe they might. But I do think they're starting to get why something like Bitcoin would be important.
So then, all right, a bit of a two-parter here. Do you think that the fact that, the billionaires and the hedge fund managers and the large institutional investors of the world are starting to take this on board, do you think firstly that that's an admission that they recognize that there are holes and gaps in the system as well? This is sort of a tacit admission saying hey, even though we're the ones profiting here, there's some real problems and we're worried this might all come crashing down. And then secondly, how do we teach that lesson to the retail investor? How do we teach that to the average man on the street to get that sort of mass adoption out there and that retail interest out there?
One, it's definitely an admission, no question. They're flat out coming out and saying it. But I don't want to also give the illusion that every billionaire, we're seeing a fraction of billionaires, right, a fraction of companies. It's not like there's a huge wave of companies coming in. And to be quite frank, it's way too small for most of them to do it. People joke about what if Apple did what MicroStrategy did? Apple can't do that with an asset that has a few $100 billion market cap, right? Which is actually very bullish because price is going to have to be 50, 60, 100,000 for the market cap of Bitcoin to even be big enough for the really big players to come in, right? So we're still talking, when we say institution, we're talking about family offices, crypto hedge funds. We're not talking about the biggest hedge funds in the world. And we're not talking about endowments and really huge institutions and the biggest corporations. So I think that comes later and might be still years away. So just to temper sort of the definition of what institutions are or big money in this case. But yes, I think it's a very clear admission. Paul Tudor Jones price was 8,000-9,000 when he was saying, listen, I have Bitcoin because it's a hedge, and all these guys, they're saying that there's a problem with the system. I think it's important to realize, and maybe they realize, if you look at the cycles of history, when there's, I don't think we're going to get hyperinflation of the dollar, by the way, just to be clear. But when you have those situations, Weimar Republic, whatever, Venezuela, Lebanon, whatever, that's when the people rise up. That's when you see the pitchforks and the torches, and that's the people's houses they end up at with the pitchforks and torches are the billionaires, right? So I think that they can only build their castle so much before they realize that they need to start being more men of the people. That's certainly what my conversation with Michael Saylor said to some degree. He just decided which team he wanted to be on, and this was the side that he felt was doing right. He didn't want to be on the side of the legacy systems anymore. So I think they're admitting it, and they're also to some degree hedging their bets. They don't want to be the ones that are under attack. Also, every asset they own, largely, certainly in the past, now obviously it's a global economy, but for a lot of these people, they're all systematic risk, right? It's all tied. If the dollar goes down and their stocks go down and property prices go down, everything's going down together, and Bitcoin gives them that chance to hedge against that. So yes, I do think they're missing it. As far as teaching the lesson, all we can do is, it's funny, we use the term influencer, like I'm a social media influencer. I hate that term so much because I've always laughed at people taking pictures of themselves on Instagram as a business. And now all of a sudden I'm lumped into that. But I think that the idea that everyone in the community is an influencer for the people outside of the community is much more compelling to me, right? I don't need to keep throwing my thoughts into the echo chamber. I need to go outside and throw them to the average people that we're talking about and try to teach them. So I think that the best way to teach those people is for all of us to just keep putting out content, keep screaming from the mountaintop, and just, convert them one person at a time. It's not how many Twitter follows you have that allows you to do that. It's how many people you know in the real world, right? So if you're a person and you know 3 people that you think might benefit from Bitcoin, go talk to them about it. Be that crazy person at Thanksgiving who's preaching this magic internet money, and take the risk that they might lose money at first and not like you, because at the end of the day, we need to go get the normal people, not the ones who already understand.
How do I explain, all right, so I'm sitting at my Christmas dinner, my Thanksgiving dinner, whatever it is in the near future. And I'm talking to a friend and saying to them, hey, look, you should get on board, whatever. And they just turn to me as, I'm sure most crypto holders have heard in the past, and say, of course you want me to buy. That means that your assets are worth more. Why would are you just pitching because you've already sunk into this? Anyone in a Ponzi scheme is going to be doing the same thing. I might understand the different metrics, but how do I combat that? How do we get past that level of sort of broad skepticism?
First, I would say don't flatter yourself. Your $100 buy on Coinbase isn't going to affect my holdings. Unless I'm sitting with Elon Musk at dinner or Tim Cook or something. I think that we're past the point where we hear it really being called a Ponzi scheme like we did in 2017. I think there's a sort of universal admission that Bitcoin is worth considering now, right? I don't really get the you're crazy thing as hard as I did over the past few years, especially when the price was dropping and everybody had their I told you so hat on, telling us how it was going to go to zero. But I think that the case is so much clearer now for Bitcoin. Like I said, you just can't avoid looking at the world right now and thinking this is wrong. This doesn't work, right? So it sort of goes back to the very obvious Chamath kind of argument. Just buy 1%, put 1% of your money in this thing just in case. You'll never notice if it goes to zero, but you'll definitely notice if it 100x's and everything goes down on the other side. So I think there's just very clear arguments for it. Do you understand inflation? This is deflationary. We know exactly how many there will be. We know that there's demand. We know that the supply is reducing. Look at these billionaires. I hate to keep looking at them because, short the banks, long Bitcoin, short the bankers and whatever, but there are very smart people now who are exposed to this. You can talk to them about central bank digital currencies. Say, listen, everything is going digital. You're going to lose your privacy when that happens. At least, expose yourself to some Bitcoin. There's a million arguments for it, but I don't think that we're going to get that Ponzi scheme. You want me to buy this for yourself. I think that people understand, listen, you say, nobody's going to bail you out. You need to protect yourself. You need to protect your family. Expose yourself a little bit to this. Put it away. Don't think about it. Custody it. And if the world goes to shit, you'll at least have something to fall back on. I don't think it's going to be a very hard sell anymore.
So then, I guess the ultimate question coming out of that, and you said ditch the bankers, go for Bitcoin. All those sort of mantras that have been around for years. Is Bitcoin still a revolution?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I think that it's a different revolution for different people, and that's fine. Your true maximalists, which is a very small percentage of the population, want to self-custody. They want to be their own bank. They don't ever want to have a normal bank account, all of those things, right? But for Bitcoin to reach its true potential, we need a lot more people on board than just those maximalists. I see them, freaking out oh, you're going to buy it on PayPal. You don't have your own keys. You can't send it anywhere. Okay, that's a problem for me. That's a problem for you as maximalists. But like my parents don't care about that, right? 75-year-olds who just want to buy a little bit of Bitcoin, or your average friend who doesn't understand anything and just wants it to be familiar, like buying from a bank. They don't care about your own keys. They don't care about being able, they just want to buy it and know that they have a little bit and have exposure to it, right? So all these things, these mainstream adoption, we need that. There's two sides, right? You can be the super intense person who wants to have multi-sig, which is me, right? I'm not buying it on PayPal. Like my security setup is so insane after being hacked so many times, and I'm crazy about it, but I don't expect everyone else. And I want everybody else to come in on their own terms, so I do think it's still a revolution. It's just that revolutions, when they work, they eventually reach the mainstream, right? What's the point about rebelling against something if you're going to be rebelling forever and never want to actually have your rebellion be successful? So I think that this revolution is coming to fruition, and we should not question it or doubt that that's a positive.
But don't we risk, ending up? I mean, I take your point. The revolution obviously needs to become mainstream if it's to be successful. But don't we risk mirroring too much of the mainstream? I look at some of the sort of crypto financial institutions that are being set up now, and I sort of wonder, doesn't that look a hell of a lot like a bank?
They are banks.
All right. Yeah. I mean, and is that a bad thing?
I don't think it's a bad thing. Like we're talking about the Celsius and the Voyagers and the BlockFis of the world, obviously. Right. A bank's giving me less than 1%, less than a half of 1% on my money. I can put money in Celsius and earn 10% yield, just like a savings account in the 1980s, right? That's an incredible use case. That's one of the best selling points for mainstream adoption in my eyes. I might not be able to sell someone that Bitcoin is the future and it's a great hedge, but I can certainly sell them on convert your dollars to USDC, which is backed 1-for-1 like the gold standard, and go earn 10% on it, and you can't get anything in a bank. That's forget DeFi, like yield farming, and forget food coins and sushis and yams and goldfish or whatever the hell else they've created since we started having this conversation. You can buy a stable coin that's 1-for-1 backed USDC, just like the gold standard that anyone would have remembered from, previous, before the 1970s. And you can go earn 8.5 to 10% on your money indefinitely, securely, with very little risk. And people say, how do they do that? Well, they just give you the money instead of keeping it for themselves. It's not really that complicated. Banks make 17% a year on securities lending and give 0% to you, and they're lending your money in your securities. Well, these platforms give you 85% of what they make, and they keep the rest. You have the Pareto principle, It's not complicated. So no, yes, they might be banks, but they're what banks should be. And they're not, exposed necessarily to those same systems. So I think it's very bullish. I think it's a very positive thing for the space. Yes, the fear, I guess, would be that a few people centralize control and power and buy all of it, right? There's a few billionaires who whatever, but we've heard about that with the miners for years, and the whales and these mythical. You're not going to ever be in a market where the people who were early or aggressive aren't going to have a certain amount of control at a certain level. I still think that Bitcoin is the greatest free market that's ever existed. It's the greatest, idiosyncratic risk asset that's ever been created. And so for me, I think there's already enough out there. It's in enough people's hands that no matter what happens, I think it's going to remain with its use case. It might just be like a Diet Coke version or something of what we believed, but still so much of a better alternative than legacy systems.
Right. All right. So in saying that, then I want to switch from the sort of use case and the sales case over to like the marketing case and the education case, because you and I can sit and have this conversation, and we can love it, and those already in the space love to hear these elements. They love to understand them better. They love to utilize even the basic facts that okay, now I can get more return on my investments than I could in other markets, so let's use it. But in having that conversation, you and I both recognize that we've lost whatever percentage it is, 40, 60, 80% of the population, maybe even more, who just start hearing these numbers and go, I don't care. I keep my money in a bank. It's there at the end of the day. I don't have to think about it. Who cares? Why do I want to think about this? So again, I guess I want to know, there are things that we now use every day, whether it be the voice over internet protocol that we now use to make calls on WhatsApp, or whether it be HTML in order to use our internet services. That are these complex systems that most people don't want to know about, but we use them because they've been sold to us effectively over time, or we've gotten used to them. How do we turn Bitcoin, crypto, whatever, even DeFi into these sort of just don't even think about it? You don't need to understand the plumbing, just trust that the product works sort of system.
First of all, voice over IP was invented by Alex Mashinsky, who is the CEO of Celsius. So funny example that you give there, but I also had him on the podcast and he talked about this exact topic, that he believes that eventually you just put your money in Celsius or one of these platforms and it becomes as universal as putting your money in a bank and move on from there. So you don't think about how your cell phone works. You don't think about how your email works. You don't think about how your internet works, right? So this is where the differentiation, I think, between blockchain and Bitcoin comes in, right? Obviously, Bitcoin is sort of the invention of the blockchain, but I think anyone with a bit of tech savvy understands that the blockchain will be used in we'll have endless applications, and you as the end user will not think about the fact that it's being run by blockchain, right? So I don't know how we do that like to the public, but I think that blockchain technology, regardless of the success of Bitcoin or any of the specific coins, right, separate from the market, the technology will become the underlying tech in a ton of systems, probably ones that we can't even imagine, right? I mean, a distributed ledger obviously has benefits that are lacking in other systems. How do we make Bitcoin that? I think it's a different conversation, and one I don't really know the answer. It kind of goes back to what we're talking about. Is every person in the world going to end up exposed to Bitcoin? I don't think that's going to happen. You know what I mean? So, but I do think that the underlying technology is going to be used for everything.
And should that even be the goal? Are people deluding themselves when they talk about mass adoption to try and get everyone involved? The next billion people. Does that even matter anymore? We've got the billionaires on board. Isn't that enough?
Well, it's enough for price to go up, but it's not enough for us to see, Bitcoin saving people in places like Venezuela, Argentina, Lebanon, where you have hyperinflation and those things. We sit in our little cloud city in the United States where we don't have to worry about the value of the dollar and talk about Bitcoin in theory, but then you get on the ground in Venezuela and cryptocurrencies are literally saving people's lives on a daily basis, right? Nobody believes that's going to happen in the United States, but you can see the importance of it in a place where hyperinflation becomes a reality and where people literally can't get money out of a bank. Their monthly salary is lower than the cost of eggs, and you have, no ability to purchase anything. So I think we get mass adoption, certainly if the global economy collapses. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but I don't want to be the guy who says like Bitcoin only finds importance when we live in like a Mad Max dystopian future, right? I think that the clearest path for Bitcoin to be mainstream is for people to just want to own a little bit in case everything goes bad.
It sounds a strong sales pitch, just get everyone a little bit on board and see where they can run forward with it. But all right, getting off Bitcoin itself, because obviously that's not the only thing in the industry. That's not the only thing you talk about. Well, yeah.
I'm kidding. I talk about everything else. Definitely sarcastic.
Yeah. No, but for sure. Looking at the news, that would be you couldn't be blamed for thinking that. But all right, so looking beyond Bitcoin itself, looking at you've talked about projects in the blockchain and the underlying tech that can save the world, that can really truly save lives on the ground day to day, can help create new systems, can help develop. What's the most exciting project? And maybe it doesn't have to be one specific project, but maybe a field that you find interesting in the blockchain space that is really just like getting you excited right now. Obviously beyond, if you could turn away from the price charts for a moment.
Well, I'm definitely not one of those people who believes it's Bitcoin and only Bitcoin, hence my sort of sarcastic quip there. I'm a huge Ethereum bull. And, that was actually the case before the DeFi craze even started. It's not hard to check my timeline or read anything I've written and see that I always believe that Ethereum was going to be successful. I don't view it as a competitor for Bitcoin. I view it, as a platform and not a store of value in the same regard. I just think they're two very different things. But anyone who's participated in DeFi and was paying hundreds of dollar gas fees to buy any of these crazy things on Uniswap sees that there's a high demand for Ethereum. But I do believe, touching on that DeFi, in whatever form it eventually manifests and becomes more of a solidified reality, I think that is extremely exciting, because that's how you really unbank yourself, you know. And so going back to these platforms where you can earn yield without doing all this crazy stuff. I mean, if you're in your 20s and you put a few $1,000s away and earn 10% interest your whole life, you'll actually have wealth. Not that complicated. Like, that to me is so important as an investor. That's what I learned as a kid. I'm in my 40s, but you can't do it anymore in a bank, right? So DeFi, I think, is very, very exciting. I just think that, like anything else, you have this sort of combination. There's absolutely outright scams all over the place. Right? Rug pulls, somebody raises money, lists the coin and sells all of it and dumps on people. Okay, that's a very small percentage, right? And I think that in any new tech or any new field, you have that, and that's not unique to cryptocurrency or to DeFi. But then I would say that, you know, the large majority are people who are really trying something, right? They just have an idea, and now we have a way with less friction to get to market. You know, you can create a coin and have an idea, and it can be trading or, you know, be in use in a few weeks. So I think mostly it's just brilliant people trying to like improve the future, you know? And so I think that it's really exciting and really cool. And there are going to be projects much like the internet boom in the late 90s, you know, where the pets.coms failed, but we saw the birth of Amazons and, you know, things like that. I think that that's where we're going to see. Most of them will die off and they'll, you know, sort of flutter away into obscurity, but then we'll have a few that just absolutely like are world changing, you know? So I think that DeFi is, it's such a cliche answer right now, but like, that's where all of the focus of the crypto world is, right? Even projects that had nothing to do with DeFi are all DeFi projects now, right? Yeah.
It's become the catch-all umbrella. I guess the only thing I wonder, though, you know, people always love to make the comparison to the dot-com boom of the 90s and sort of say, you know, here we are at the edge of a grand boom, a grand bubble. But like, I guess one difference I've heard the argument made by some is that whereas, you know, that was a case of investing, you know, amounts here or there, that we're talking about people's like entire financial, you know, scalability of financial identities, you know, being put into these, you know, new projects that have, you know, I don't know, questionable technical grounding sometimes. You know, sometimes codes need to be worked out, sometimes they haven't been properly audited, whatnot, and it creates a certain amount of, you know, of FUD, of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and people that, you know, don't understand fully, get in ahead of themselves, and then get burned by the system and don't want to re-enter. Is that actually a problem, or is this just, you know, the teething of a new industry? And is there any way we can help to mitigate against some of that FUD?
Well, you can't protect people from themselves, unfortunately, no matter how hard the United States tries to, because they don't let us do anything, especially if you're in New York. But yeah, I mean, investing 101 is never go all in, never invest more than you can afford to lose. I mean, there's all very, very cliche and obvious statements, right? So nobody should ever put all of their wealth into a project that's named after a taco, right? So
is that the rule? That's the number one investing rule. If it's named after a taco,
burritos, I think, are fine if you ask Buffett.
Okay.
At the Warren buffet, so to speak, which food you want to choose. But yeah, I mean, so I think that's just dumb, right? That's just like not common sense. That's just stupid. And that's lazy. It's trying to like become rich with no effort, you know, and that doesn't work in investing and it doesn't work in trading, you know? So yeah, I think that that's just scary that people do that. I don't think that they should be all in anything. I think, especially like if you're investing in these coins on a Uniswap or something, like I'm a trader, right? That's like my quote unquote profession. But because I'm a trader and been doing it so long, I know that like I'm probably going to lose money. So most of my portfolio is in investments. I invest with at least 70% of my portfolio, and I rarely trade with more than 15 or 20% of my portfolio, even if I'm on like a great run. You know, so like if I'm trading something on Uniswap, God forbid, like there's no stop losses on there. So if I'm buying something on there, even if I believe in it, it's only 1% of my entire portfolio, because if it goes to zero, I will only lose 1% of my portfolio, which is my risk tolerance. So I think if people approached it with more of a systematic sort of view and looked at their entire portfolio and realized, I mean, nobody, as sad as it is, you still need to have 6 months of money set aside in an emergency fund to make sure that you survive if you lose your job before you can invest in anything. And most people don't do that, right? They're like young, they kind of go all in. Every penny they have, like you said, is in these projects, and it ends the same way every time. But I think likening it to the internet boom and bust, which I sort of alluded to before, it's fair in one way, but maybe it's not fair. I'm not saying that there's first of all, we saw the DeFi bubble pop already, right? So it's not much argument, but I'm not saying that there's going to be this like grand destruction of every company. I'm just saying that over time, the ones with the best use case, the strongest communities, and that actually show usefulness are the ones that will survive. And most of them will just remain sort of ideas on GitHub and that never sort of come to fruition because people are throwing all these brilliant ideas at the wall. And when that happens, most of them just don't work or they're not adopted, you know? So yeah, I don't think that it's a bubble in that regard. I just think that, you know, only a few of them are actually going to be useful.
Right. And sort of, you know, looking at those uses, looking at those ideas. I mean, again, you know, looking back at the lessons of the past, I guess everyone thinks about crypto and they're looking out in the next big project with that idea of you know, this could be the chance that I make the investment, the one right investment that changes my life forever. You know, everyone's heard the story of the $1,000 investment that now is the nest egg for, you know, a $20 million, you know, lifetime, you know, outcome, whatever. You know, there are stories galore all through the industry. I guess I wonder, with that attitude in mind, with that sort of gambler's attitude in mind, do you think that the space, you know, is open to the sort of sensible investing strategies that you're sort of proposing, those sort of sane-headed, let's put 1% and test the waters, for those who are just like, you know what, maybe I just put it into a bunch of projects and see which one makes me the inevitable millionaire?
I think it depends on how young you are, but you know, I'm in my 40s. I have 2 kids. That's not going to be my approach to finances. But when I was in my 20s, I would max out my credit card just to go on a trip and not know how I was going to pay for it. Right. So it was a totally different financial mentality. And I think if you're in your 20s, you can sort of take those gambling bets. But it's exactly that. And you said it, right? Gambler's mentality. And that's why almost everyone loses all their money in markets if they try to actively trade as opposed to passively invest. 95% of traders fail within 2 months, right? I mean, it's a pretty astounding statistic. I'm not saying those people are traders. Maybe they think they're investing in it, but it's structured in the same manner as a trade because they have very little knowledge of what's happening. They put all their money in and they hope for the best, right? It's just lazy. It's thinking that you're going to win the lottery, right? And it's no different than the lottery or, you know, a scratch off ticket or putting it all on a number on roulette. It's the same thing. No matter how much you believe in it, you have to understand that most things will fail. Just the reality of it. Most companies fail. Most restaurants fail. Most DeFi projects are going to fail. It's just, you know, it's the way it is. So you have to size your bet proportionate to the risk.
So I want to change tact a little bit, get off the, you know, the intelligence or stupidity of potential traders out there and the folly of youth, which you know, we've all either experienced or know plenty of stories about. I want to talk about the media market, you know, when it comes to the crypto space and sort of understanding how information is conveyed and purveyed within this space, because I always find this very interesting. You know, there's a lot of, you know, credible, intelligent, you know, meaningful thinkers in this space who are going out there providing solid information and trying their best, whether institutionally, you know, through your Cointelegraph, your CoinDesk, your whatevers, or you know, individually, you know, as an influencer, you know, going out, you know, more on their own. Do you think that the crypto media space and the crypto information space is doing a good job of actually putting this information out there and speaking to an audience, whether narrow or wide, and where do you think they could do better?
Catch-22. If you have coin in the title of your publication, then you're yelling into an echo chamber of people who believe in what you're saying, right? And that's no fault to them. I love all these publications. I'm a religious reader of CoinDesk and Cointelegraph. They're always in my feed. But I don't think that your average person is checking Cointelegraph or CoinDesk or has ever heard of them, right? So it is sort of like news for the community itself, right?
Mhm.
So it's interesting. In 2017, you started seeing mainstream media start to cover Bitcoin, I think, a lot more. And every time it happened, it was like these huge price swings. I think an idea that we've matured a lot actually now is that we get good news on Bitcoin on mainstream media or bad news every day, and it never affects the price, right? So it's sort of that's a tangent, but it's sort of a indication that we're in a much more mature market now. I would say that the very nature of media, crypto or otherwise, has changed. This election, I think, if COVID is what did it to financial markets, I would say that this election was the crack in the structure for mainstream media. I think, obviously I'm speaking as an American, but I think whichever side of the political spectrum or wherever you were on, you could finally look even at your own media that you follow and be like, this is just ridiculous. Like, this is a biased echo chamber. They're reporting opinions and thoughts, and there's nobody really reporting news anymore, right? All you had to do was watch these guys stand on TV for 8 straight days live, talking about votes that weren't even counted yet and trying to create a story out of it, right? So long way of saying that I think the way that news is improving now is that people are largely probably starting to steer away from mainstream outlets and looking to these smaller outlets. And then you get, that kind of drills you down to podcasts and individuals like the Joe Rogans of the world who have become their own, like, he can't be canceled, right? I mean, he's his own media empire. And I think a lot of people in the space, I mean, certainly I would love to have that. The Pomps, you know what I mean? They're sort of like building their own little media circle where they can, whether for better or for worse, but they can express their thoughts, what they believe to be fact. And the people who align with them have a place to go and find more accurate information. So I would say that that media in general is trending sort of away from the mainstream and towards these smaller media sources, perhaps sometimes individuals and stuff like that. So I think that that's where crypto news will reach the mainstream and where it should be focused, right? On the bigger podcasts that cross over to the mainstream, financial news, the CNBCs of the world, those places, it used to be a joke when Bitcoin was on there, but now you see billionaires on there talking about Bitcoin. I don't know what the media can do better. I mean, you can't make everybody be more interested in it and check into CoinDesk, right? I think they're doing a great job of reporting the news. I think, and I think that most of them have become pretty unbiased. You don't really see like the same level of maximalism or bias against certain projects and stuff in crypto news, I think, that you used to see. So, I mean, a long-winded way of saying I think they're doing a great job, but I think that in general, if the crypto news wants to spread it beyond, then we need to sort of like find those outlets that are maybe more welcome to it, but also focus very heavily on, these other sort of alternative media sources.
Right, but I mean, isn't there a risk of its own echo chamber effect in doing that? I may decide to get up and listen to the Pomp on the morning, and I'll enjoy what he might have to say. But like, my sister or whatnot, who is never going to do that. She's never going to turn to him for interesting financial perspectives and advice. And if mainstream isn't covering it, or even if they are, that only sort of as a niche little issue, a little like sort of token idea. Oh, look, PayPal did something cute. That's interesting. Doesn't that risk further isolating the community from the rest of the financial, if not mainstream world?
Perhaps. But what else are we going to do? Not talk about it? I don't know like I said, I wish I had an answer for that, because then I'd probably be a lot wealthier because I would have created whatever that news source is. It goes back to what I talked about being an influencer. You make your sister listen to it. You sit with her and say, this episode's going to blow your mind. He explains it better than I did. Listen to his conversation with Michael Saylor. Maybe you'll see why I'm so passionate about this. So there's that sort of one-on-one opportunity that we have. I think the content is there, right? Like the content is being created. The arguments are all laid out. I mean, I've listened to my own podcast with Michael Saylor literally 10 times. Not because I said more than 100 words in an hour and a half, because I didn't. I literally just let him talk. I was like, turn on hot mic, go for it. You know what I mean? And I asked a few questions, but he made the case for me. I've sent that to hundreds of people and they're all compelled. I've gotten people to buy Bitcoin by playing them that podcast. You know what I mean? So again, yes, we always risk the echo chamber, but I think that Bitcoin is largely being painted in a positive light right now when it escapes our echo chamber and hits mainstream media. There's people that, the people that they listen to, they go, when the Michael Saylor, I keep harping on the same points, but when Paul Tudor Jones speaks, these guys are listening. You know what I mean? Like my friends who work at hedge funds and who work at institutions and stuff. I went to the University of Pennsylvania in the 90s, like going to get a job on Wall Street was like going trick-or-treating for Halloween candy, at that time. So yeah, their clients are calling. They, even if they don't want to be a part of Bitcoin, their clients do. So they need to figure it out. So I think that they're, I don't know how to circle back to media and fix the media, but I do think that generally they're doing a good job. Yes, of course, we have an echo chamber, but I think that, if we yell loud enough, some of that is certainly escaping.
All right. Well, Scott, I'll be sure to point out this to my sister when I'm sitting her down and forcing her to listen to an hour of Michael Saylor. I'll say, Scott told me to do it. I had to. I'm sorry.
Blame me. I encourage everyone to blame me. I get trolled enough anyways. I can take a few more. Fine.
You got the thick skin, and I appreciate that. All right, Scott, I want to wrap us up fairly soon, but before I let you go, I guess just looking forward to 2021. It seems crazy as we're making it to the end of this, crazy end of a year. Looking forward to 2021. Is there anything in particular you're looking out for? Any trends you think are really worth watching, whether from a trading perspective, from an education perspective, or from a personal passion perspective? Anything that you're really focused in on?
I just want to make sure that we don't have another bubble pop like 2017. Not that I'm the one who can control that by any means, but I just think that it's essential that we all just keep fighting the good fight, really trying to get the word out there. I mean, as a trader, I'm just going to continue trading day to day or week to week or month to month, whatever I see on a chart. So it's sort of irrelevant what happens necessarily in 2021. You can short it or you can long it, right? I mean, so it's sort of irrelevant as a trader, but as an investor and a believer, I think that we're just scratching the surface of where this is going. I think that the global economy will not be fixed. I happen to believe that COVID is real and growing. Personally, I'm ending a 2-week quarantine tomorrow because our family was exposed to it. So it's very real for me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's very real for me with an 18-month-old and a 5.5-year-old in my house and no help. So, but I think that COVID gets worse. I think the stock market inevitably corrects again. I think that the global economy worsens, and I think that then the case for Bitcoin increases. So I'm looking for that to happen throughout 2021. I don't make grandiose price predictions, but I would be very surprised if a year from now the price is lower than it is currently. I think, and I think that it used to sound insane to talk about 40 grand and 100 grand and $1 million and whatever, but as crazy as it sounds, I think to some degree we underestimate the potential of Bitcoin at this point if things continue down the path that they're headed. I don't think it's crazy to talk about those things. There's only 21 million ever going to be in existence. And now the big boys want some. And a lot of people have lost some. So supply, I really see a potential supply side shock throughout 2021 in Bitcoin, and people really having trouble getting their hands on it and paying an extreme premium to do so.
Well, on what could potentially be a little bit of a dark 2021, maybe Bitcoin will be that shining light on the hill that gets us all through. So, everyone pay attention, see what's going on. Scott, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Everyone listening should check out Wolf of All Streets, an amazing podcast, and the Wolf's Den Crypto newsletter. Fantastic stuff, always on point analysis. Love your work, Scott. Thanks so much for being with us. And for everyone watching, stick with us at Reimagine 2020.
Awesome. Thank you so much.